Well, folks, here is your update. It is now day 19 of Kamala Harris answering 0 questions from the press about her ridiculous radical campaign, about her ridiculous radical VP pick, about everything surrounding the fact that she literally tagged in as the Democratic presidential nominee almost 3 weeks ago. No questions, nothing. Lots of breaking news. We're going to get to all of it. Daily Wire Plus members have unlimited on-demand access to our uncensored, ad-free daily shows, real-time breaking news, investigative journalism. Do not be left in the dark. Join the fight right now at dailywire.com/subscribe. You're not going to want to miss a minute because things are breaking legitimately almost every minute. All right, so the Trump campaign finally seems to be finding its footing against Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. And part of that is because Kamala Harris made the signal failure of selecting Tim Walz as her vice presidential candidate. They couldn't do big-time vetting into any of these candidates because the timeline was just too short. But they did enough vetting to know that Josh Shapiro was a Jew, and that was unacceptable, as we'll see in a minute. It is very obvious that Kamala Harris is pandering full-on to the pro-Hamas crowd. She is deeply afraid that she is going to lose, quote-unquote, uncommitted voters in Michigan. Those would be the pro-Hamas voters who are angry at Joe Biden for not being sufficiently obeisant to the Iranians. And so she is attempting to make overtures with them. That wouldn't have been easy if Josh Shapiro had been on the ticket because he's a Jew, not even because he's a Zionist, but because he's a Jew. Because Tim Walz is sort of like half-heartedly Zionist, as it turns out. But the real issue was, can't have a Jew, so she picks Tim Walz instead. And Tim Walz is a radical. And what that allows for is the labeling correctly of the Harris-Walz ticket as the most radical ticket in the history of the United States, which it is. This is a radical left ticket. And the Trump campaign so far has not been able to sort of grasp what exactly they're going to run on. After all, they were running against Joe Biden until 1 minute ago. And then in a switch in time that boggles the mind, they literally took their dead old president out back, old Yeller style, and then they substituted in Kamala Harris. And within 1 minute, all the enthusiasm was back. All the money was pouring in. They opened up a fire hose of cash on the Kamala Harris campaign. They've been flooding the internet waves with Kamala Harris commercials. You literally can't watch a Coco Melon video without seeing Kamala Harris commercials at this point in time. I know because I was showing a Coco Melon Wheels on the Bus video to one of my kids. A Kamala Harris video pops up directly in front of it. So making sure that they get the 1-year-old vote. It is absolutely incredible how much money they are pouring into attempting to redefine Kamala Harris for the American people. And I think people on the right, again, people who are close watchers of politics, are bewildered by this. Kamala Harris is a charmless politician. Kamala Harris is an untalented politician as soon as she's off the teleprompter. But here's the thing. They're smart enough to realize this, and so they're keeping her on teleprompter. And so the Trump campaign seemed to be searching its way to something like a counter. And honestly, that's their fault. They should have been out front. They should have done it right away. And we made Scamala, which is our 3-part series on Kamala Harris, which we will now be updating in very short order to include Tim Walz. We made that series like a couple weeks before Biden dropped. So it's kind of unforgivable that the RNC and the Trump campaign didn't see this coming and prep for it and drop $100 million in ads on Kamala Harris and Tim Walz as soon as she was made the nominee and as soon as he was made the vice presidential nominee. But it's still early. It is only August 8th. The election is not until November. And that means that if the Trump campaign can find its footing, remember, this is like the hottest period for Kamala Harris. She is the new hot thing. She is totally fetch. She is making the fetch happen. She's all the things. She's dancing and she's filled with joy. And then you see her record. And then you're exposed to who she is. And it is the job of the Trump campaign to do that, which the media will not. And that is expose Kamala Harris for who she is. So yesterday, the Trump campaign finally started putting out ads about Kamala Harris. Here's what their first big ad drop looked like.
I am radical. I do believe that we need to get radical.
Radical Kamala raised money for a fund that bailed out violent criminals, that freed murderers and rapists. They even bailed out a domestic abuser. Days later, he murdered a man. And defunding police?
The idea that more police equals more safety, that's just wrong.
We have to have this conversation about redirecting resources.
Kamala Harris, dangerously liberal.
I am radical.
That is the Make America Great Again PAC, which is, of course, correct. And there are 1,000 commercials where that came from. I mean, that's just her on the cops. Wait until you get to her on foreign policy or her on inflation or her on economics or her on equity. Kamala is, of course, incredibly radical, and that means a very insecure future. Security is top of mind for many Americans during these crazy times. Security for the country, for our leaders, for our families, for our finances. You are not financially secure if all your eggs are in one basket. You should consider diversifying at least some of your savings today with the help of our friends over at Birch Gold Group. Gold and silver are an excellent way to diversify your savings. They're a hedge against inflation, a physical asset that is in high demand globally. Through my friends at Birch Gold Group, you can own physical gold and silver in a tax-sheltered retirement account. That is correct. You can diversify an old IRA or 401k for no money out of pocket into an IRA in gold and silver. That's just one thing you can do today to secure your family's savings. Text BEN to 989898. Receive a free, no-obligation info kit to learn the role precious metals play in your overall savings strategy. Again, text BEN to 989898. With an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau, thousands of happy customers, you can trust Birch Gold to help diversify your savings and secure your family's financial future. Text BEN to 989898 today. If you're feeling a little bit, uneasy about the future, it might be worthwhile taking some of your savings and putting it into gold. Text BEN to 989898 today to get started. And she is a deeply radical candidate. Donald Trump was sounding off about that yesterday. Now, President Trump needs to be on the campaign trail. He does. This week, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, they're hitting every swing state. JD Vance, as we will see, the vice presidential candidate for the Republicans, he is on the campaign trail. He is hitting all of these states. But President Trump needs to be on the road combating this right now. Those swing states are all too close. When you look at the Real Clear Politics polling average, Trump not only has dropped behind Kamala Harris in the Real Clear Politics national polling average as of this moment, she is now running slightly ahead of him in Wisconsin. She's running slightly ahead of him in Michigan. She is running within 2 points of the margin of error in Pennsylvania. And that is too close for comfort because if she wins those 3 states, she wins the election. So President Trump needs to get on the road right now, and he needs to take the message to the American people that she is deeply radical. I think he is setting the groundwork for that. Yesterday, he was appearing via phone on Fox and Friends, and he said the correct thing. This is the most radical ticket in American history.
There's never been a ticket like this. This is a ticket that would want this country to go communist immediately, if not sooner. We want no security. We want no anything. He's very heavy into transgender. Anything transgender he thinks is great. And he's not where the country is on anything.
That is absolutely true. That message needs to, of course, get more focused. It needs to be more specific. And attacking Walz is fine. He really needs to be attacking Harris. She's the one who's at the top of the ticket. But by picking Walz, what she did is she underscored just how radical she is. Here he was attacking Kamala Harris, pointing out, for example, that she wants no fracking, that she's in favor of defunding the police. This is totally correct from President Trump. He needs to take this show on the road immediately.
She wants no fracking. She's trying to say now that she wants, she's gone through every single thing that was a horror show, and she disavows it now. She disavows the no fracking. If she does no fracking, and she will 100% do it. One thing I've learned about politicians, and you people knew it maybe before me, but I've known it for a long time, their first thought is the thought that they end up doing. She's for no fracking. She's for defund the police. She was the original defunder of the police. She was the original no cash bail, cashless bail, which has caused havoc. And look at how she's destroyed San Francisco.
That is absolutely correct. That is absolutely correct. And not only that, it turns out that, as everybody knows, she's really, really soft on Hamas. Really soft on Hamas. The reason the radical left is ecstatic with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz is because they know that they'll be much softer on Hamas. So yesterday, Kamala Harris was doing another one of these pre-scripted rallies in Detroit. Again, she's not going to be caught on camera answering an actual question because she's awful off the teleprompter. She's a complete creation of the teleprompter. But she got off teleprompter for just a minute because there were protesters in the crowd in Detroit who were shouting Genocide Joe because they believed that Joe Biden was not sufficiently cowardly with regard to Hamas and Iran, even though he's been pretty cowardly with regard to Hamas and Iran, but not enough. So they're very angry because what they really want is for Hamas and Iran to win. Listen to Kamala Harris's response. Everybody is pointing out that Kamala Harris basically tells them to sit down, but listen to how she does it. It's kind of fascinating.
He intends to surrender our fight against the climate crisis, and he intends to end the Affordable Care Act. You know what? If you want Donald Trump to win, then say that. Otherwise, I'm speaking.
So there are protesters, and they're chanting Genocide Joe and shouting at her Genocide Joe and yelling about Israel and all of the rest of this. And listen to what she doesn't say, you're wrong. Israel is our democratic ally in a fight for its life against a vast terror network sponsored by Iran. She doesn't say that Israel right now, like literally this minute, is subject to a mass response from Iran, from Hezbollah, from the Houthis. They're openly threatening it. The United States has aircraft carriers in the Med right now, in the Mediterranean right now, in order to forestall that possibility. So you guys need to sit down and shut up with your pro-Hamas support. She doesn't say that, of course, because she won't say that because she needs those supporters. And that's what she says. She says right there, you guys, do you want Trump to win? Don't you understand I'm your friend? I'm your friend, right? You need to sit down. You need to be quiet because then if you go against me, Trump might win. And we all know Trump is pro-Israel, but I'm anti-Israel and I don't like Israel. And so you should really sit down. You should shut up because I'm talking right now and we need to win. And this is no different than when Barack Obama said to Dmitry Medvedev back in 2012, please tell your boss, Vladimir, that I'll go, that go easy on me right now because I'll go easy on Russia later. I mean, that's what she is saying to the protesters. How do we know that that's absolutely 100% the case? Because in Detroit, she then met with a bunch of pro-Hamas protesters. According to the New York Times, the founders of the Uncommitted National Movement, the group that mobilized more than 100,000 people to withhold their votes from President Biden in this year's Michigan primary over his support for Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza, were among those invited to welcome Harris and Tim Walz to Michigan in a photo line. So you had 100,000 people who were mobilized to vote uncommitted in the Democratic primary, and Kamala Harris wants to bring them back in the fold. And that means she needs to take Israel and throw it right under the bus in favor of these pro-Hamas insane people. The founders, Abbas Alawiya and Laila Alabad, said they asked Ms. Harris for a meeting to discuss an arms embargo on Israel. An arms embargo. And according to the New York Times, quote, Harris listened to stories of people in Michigan who have had dozens of family members killed in Gaza. The leaders asked to meet with her about the embargo request. She indicated she was open to it and introduced the two leaders to her staff. Now, maybe that's just her pawning off these crazy people on staff. Maybe. Or maybe what she should say is, of course, we're not going to arms embargo a Democratic ally that is under a terror assault that was initiated by the worst mass killing of Jews since the Holocaust. That's what a moral person might say. Imagine, once again, if the roles were reversed. Imagine if a bunch of white supremacists came to a Trump rally and they said, you know, Mr. President, we need a meeting with you because what we really, really need is a deportation of everybody brown. That's what we need, a deportation of everybody brown. And Trump said, you know what, we'll have a meeting later about it. That's the equivalent. That is the moral equivalent of what these people are. They hate Jews. They hate Israel. And she is saying, maybe we'll listen to the idea of an arms embargo on our closest ally in the Middle East. That's who Kamala Harris is. That's how radical she is. And the New York Times puts it in the kindest form. Because again, the story here is not just the Harris-Walz campaign. The story here is the media's complete compliance with everything Harris-Walz related. They are just, it's unbelievable. And the media coverage of Harris-Walz is making up for the fact that they had to dump Biden overboard. So they went from sycophantically repeating the lie that Joe Biden was totally mentally well for years. And then when he exposed himself on national television as a doddering old senile fool, it embarrassed them. And so they had to throw him off the bus. But that was real uncomfortable because then they were at odds with all their best friends in the Democratic Party. So they shifted right back. And now they're back to being the actual press secretaries, the stenographers for the Harris-Walz campaign. Here's the New York Times, quote, Ms. Harris has emerged as a more empathetic voice in the administration, elevating the plight of innocent Palestinians who have been killed, starved, and displaced in Israel's war against Hamas. And while she has reiterated the United States' support for Israel's right to defend itself, she has issued the most forceful condemnation of some of Israel's tactics. Crucial Democratic voting blocs who oppose the war have demanded more action. They want to be able to speak at the convention. I wouldn't be surprised if they do it. I wouldn't be surprised if she caves and does it, because this is who she is. They are fully radical. And Republicans now have a target-rich opportunity. This is a target-rich environment. Kamala Harris is 1,000 lines of attack. Tim Walz is 1,000 lines of attack. The Tim Walz selection, again, looking horrible after 36 hours in retrospect. Tim Walz, he is not somebody who will make you sleep easy at night if you were the vice president. And speaking of sleeping easily at night, you know, it's the hot season down here in Florida, and that means that normally I'd be tossing and turning in my bed because it's just hard to find the right temperature, and you got the sheets that aren't breathable and all that. Boll & Branch fixes all of that. Boll & Branch is here to help you never sleep hot again with sheets that are woven to allow airflow and feel cool and crisp to the touch, perfect for sleepers who run hot like me. Boll & Branch has amazing options for hot sleepers. Choose from 100% organic cotton percale made with a naturally cooling weave, or their linen, which is made from European flax to be light, airy, softer than soft. Again, I love a Boll & Branch product. It's so good that we literally only use it in the house. It's what keeps me cool during the hot Florida nights. And their stuff is so good that when I go on the road, I literally travel with like a blanket from Bull & Branch. The signature hemmed sheets from Bull & Branch are a bestseller for a reason. These are truly luxury sheets that get softer every time you wash them. Buttery to the touch, super breathable. They're perfect for both cooler and warmer weather. Bull & Branch sheets are loved by millions of sleepers, including us, obviously. They have over 11,000 five-star reviews. Best of all, Bull & Branch gives you a 30-night worry-free guarantee, which means you can wash, style, and sleep in their sheets for an entire month. If you don't love them, you can send them right back with free returns on all U.S. orders. Get your coolest, most comfortable sleep with Bull & Branch. Get 15% off plus free shipping on your first set of sheets at bullandbranch.com/Ben. That's Bull & Branch, BOLLAND, branch.com/Ben for 15% off and free shipping. Exclusions apply. See site for details. And so there's the immediate media sensation of Tim Walz. Oh my gosh, he's just like your coach from high school. First of all, good indicator. I mean, there's the old joke. Coach shouldn't be teaching history. Coach shouldn't be teaching social studies. That's legit what Tim Walz did, and he knows nothing about history or social studies or economics or anything else. It turns out Tim Walz, I kid you not, does not own any stock. He has no investments. He has no real estate. He's completely disconnected from the economy of the United States. Probably he should run it. That makes perfect sense. He's a complete ignoramus on virtually every issue, and he's a radical. Donald Trump, for his part, said, "I'm thrilled with her picking Walz. It allows me to say the truth about her."
Your reaction to Governor Tim Walz joining Kamala Harris to go against you and JD Vance?
I would say my reaction is I can't believe it. I never thought this was going to be the one that was picked. I know him a little bit. I helped him very much during the riots. He's a very, very liberal man, and he's a shocking pick, and I'm thrilled. I could not be more thrilled.
I mean, he should be thrilled. The Republicans should be thrilled, but this means you got to go and got to go hard. You got to absolutely label these people for what they are. By the way, this is hilarious. You want to know one of the reasons they're now saying they can't go with the actual reason she picked Walz, right? The Democrats, the media, they can't just say the thing, because if they say the thing, it betrays exactly who the Democratic Party is at this point, an intersectional party in which you are ranked by dint of your ethnicity and group lack of success in America. That is how you are ranked in the Democratic Party hierarchy of intersectionality. The more you're a member of a group that is economically unsuccessful, the more, by their logic, that group has been victimized by American society, and the more we ought to value your opinion. The more successful you are, or the more successful the group that you are a member of, economically speaking, the less we are supposed to value your opinion. That is the actual way the Democratic Party now runs, which is why it's very important that Kamala Harris is a black woman, despite being a very successful black woman. And it is very bad that Josh Shapiro was a Jew. They can't say that. They can't say we didn't pick Josh Shapiro because he was a Jew. So instead, they've gone with their second answer. The reason that Kamala Harris actually picked Tim Walz was not because she was trying to avoid the Jew from Pennsylvania. The reason she picked Tim Walz is because he licked her boots. Okay, here is the story from Politico. This is pathetic. Quote, in the dining room of the Naval Observatory on Sunday, Tim Walz sat across from his soon-to-be running mate for the biggest interview of his life. His message to Kamala Harris and her vetting team was one of deference. Quote, I'm at the end of my career. This is not about me. This is about America's working families. If I have to run through a brick wall, if I have to do the hard things, I'm willing to do it because I'm not angling for anything else. In other words, what he was saying there is Josh Shapiro might want to be president, which, I mean, if you want to be vice president, there's a very, very good shot you want to be president. You know who knows that better than literally anyone alive? Kamala Harris, who is involved in a coup against the sitting president of the United States and the nominee of her party. Kamala Harris is like, I don't want an ambitious VP. She should know. She literally went from nowhere to VP candidate to presidential candidate without winning a single primary vote at any step along the way. It's unbelievable. But what she wants to hear is that she will not be defenestrated the same way she defenestrated her own boss. According to Politico, that low-ego, dutiful approach is exactly what Harris wanted to hear. After playing a similar role as loyal second to President Biden for nearly 4 years, Harris wanted someone with the same approach. I swear to God, the media are a tapeworm. They live inside the intestines of the Democratic Party, and they grow longer with each day. It's unreal. All they do is just eat their every day and grow longer. That's all the media are. That is such unbelievable stenography. Kamala Harris was a dutiful second. Was she, though? I see. If she were, I have a feeling she wouldn't be the presidential nominee right now after Julius Caesaring her boss. It's unbelievable. And what she really wants is somebody just like her. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. Now, again, the real reason she didn't select Shapiro is because Shapiro's last name is Shapiro. He's got the same last name I do. Not allowed. But they're going to say that it's because of the deep and abiding humility of Tim Walz. Okay, well, there's one problem, which is when you have to vet people along this short timeline, sometimes you don't bother to do basic Google searches. And it turns out that since 2018, there's been a large-scale controversy surrounding Tim Walz, and that is a stolen valor controversy. Now, stolen valor has a long history in American politics. People who run for high office by exaggerating their military service, and it turns out that many of the comrades who they shivved are pretty angry about it. So, for example, John Kerry in 2004, he had exaggerated his heroism in Vietnam. That came back to haunt him. That was only after he had made his bones by coming back from Vietnam and slandering his fellow soldiers as torturers and as sickos. He made his name doing that. Then he came around. He was like, well, I loved serving in Vietnam, my brothers. And all the Vietnam vets were like, this Jack, this one? Really? We've seen that. We've seen, I believe it was Senator Richard Blumenthal, who was also involved in a stolen valor controversy. He was a Democrat of Connecticut running for the Senate who said that he served in Vietnam, but he didn't actually serve in Vietnam, according to the New York Times. So there's a long history of stolen valor. Well, it turns out that Tim Walz is also a stolen valor guy by all available evidence. So he served in the National Guard for 24 years. But there's two separate claims about Tim Walz. One claim is that the minute he found out that he was going to be deployed to Iraq, he quit. And the minute that those rumors even began, he quit and then ran for Congress. So there's the timeline question. And then there's the fact that he apparently went around for years and years and years and claimed that he'd been deployed to war zones, which he never was. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with being in the military and not being deployed to a war zone. Plenty of members of the military were never deployed to a war zone, and we thank them for their heroic service. There is a problem when you lie about it. A military service, wonderful, praiseworthy. Lying about it, that's something else entirely. And the thing you can expect from an administration that lies about this sort of stuff is also more social unrest, because that is what Kamala Harris is here for. As social unrest escalates and crime rates climb, securing the safety of our families is more crucial than ever. I'm about as pro-Second Amendment as it gets. The thought of using lethal force might not be ideal for everyone, which is why you should check out Byrna. Introducing the Byrna Ungun, the non-lethal self-defense platform. It's lightweight, it's easy to use. It uses an easy-to-load 5-round magazine. It's powered by an 8-gram CO2 cartridge. Byrna launchers fire a 68 caliber chemical-filled projectile using patented pull-pierce technology, where the CO2 canister is only punctured on the first trigger pull, which means your launcher is always ready. It's capable of incapacitating an attacker for over 30 minutes. It's accurate and effective at over 60 feet. So it's great for home defense. And also prevents you from making, like a horrifying mistake. It requires no permits and no background checks. It's interstate travel friendly. With Byrna, you will be prepared to defend. The Byrna is a safer, more sensible alternative that could potentially save lives on both sides, protecting both user and aggressor. Visit Byrna.com/Ben for 10% off your purchase. That's BYRNA.com/Ben. Check out the latest news about Byrna. That's BYRNA.com/Ben. Here was Tim Walz in 2007, stretching some definitions to imply very strongly that he was in a war zone.
Actually, it was based on the educational system in Minnesota was one that we kind of aspired to teach in. So I ended up in southern Minnesota. My wife's been there for many generations.
And your military background?
I spent 24 years in the National Guard, some of that full-time. I was an artilleryman. I deployed in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. My battalion provided base security throughout the European theater from Turkey to England in the early stages of the war in Afghanistan. And that same battalion is now in Iraq at this time.
So he's talking about how his battalion ended up in Iraq. He was not in Iraq. He's talking about how he provided support for the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, stretching some definitions right there, at the very least. And somehow, pretty much every article from 2007 to 2018 included the lie that he was actually in Afghanistan or in Iraq. There are many, many of these. He actually endorsed a book that claimed that he was in Afghanistan. So weird that everybody got that impression when he never was. So there are a lot of veterans who are very, very angry about all of this. And then there's the question of the timeline. Because the claim from many of the members of his old battalion is that he quit on them the minute that he found out they were going to Iraq. In a letter posted to Facebook in 2018 after he first ran for governor, again, this is old stuff, this is not new. Retired Command Sergeants Major Thomas Behrens and Paul Herr said Walz retired from his 24-year tenure in the National Guard after learning his battalion would be deployed to Iraq, despite allegedly assuring his fellow troops he would join them. Quote, on May 16th, 2005, Walz quit, betraying his country, leaving the 125th Field Artillery Battalion and its soldiers hanging without its senior non-commissioned officer as the battalion prepared for war, they wrote. Walz wrapped his military career just in time for him to launch his political career. The National Guard members accused the now two-term Minnesota governor of having embellished and selectively omitted facts of his military career for years. And again, this letter suggests the exact timeline. They point out that in early 2005, a warning order was issued to this battalion, which included the position Walz was serving in, to prepare to be mobilized for active duty for deployment to Iraq. Between the time the warning order was given and the retirement, he told the brigade command sergeant major not to worry. He would be going on the mission. It appears that was a lie. Again, that's not me. Those are people who were actually deployed in his place. So this is a major scandal for Tim Walz, because when you exaggerate your military career, it turns out other veterans get kind of angry about it. One of those veterans is JD Vance, who's the vice presidential candidate on the other side of the ticket. Here was JD Vance wrecking Tim Walz over this yesterday.
What bothers me about Tim Walz is the stolen valor garbage. Do not pretend to be something that you're not. And if he wants to criticize me for getting an Ivy League education, I'm proud of the fact that my mamaw supported me, that I was able to make something of myself. I'd be ashamed if I was him and I lied about my military service like he did.
Vance is not wrong about that. And that is going to be a very live line of attack during a vice presidential debate, I would imagine. One of the National Guard members who served under Walz said the future U.S. lawmaker was eyeing a run for Congress much earlier than 2005. Would the soldier look down on him because he didn't go with us? Would the common soldier say, hey, he didn't go with us, he's trying to skip out on a deployment? He talked with us for quite a while on the subject, said Al Bonifield. He weighed that decision to run for Congress very heavily. So again, weird that the media had to go back and stealth edit all their pieces about him having been in Iraq or having been in Afghanistan. It's two separate issues. One, did he drop out knowing he was going to get deployed? And so he abandoned his guys. And two, has he then spent the subsequent 20 years or so claiming that he was deployed in places that he was not? Now, we know for a fact that he has claimed that he used weapons in war. Well, he never did. I mean, he was never in a war in terms of sort of frontline war fighting capacity. CNN had to report even that.
Walz did make a comment, speaking to a group, he's done it a couple of times, where he has used language that has suggested that he carried weapons in a fighting situation. As you know, with your contact with the military, I know from coming from a military family, there is a difference between being in a combat area, being involved at a time of war, and actually being in a position where people are shooting at you. There is no evidence that at any time Governor Walz was in a position of being shot at, and some of his language could easily be seen to suggest that he was. So that is absolutely false when he said that about gun rights out there.
Now, CNN did try to walk this back and pretend that he didn't avoid combat in any way, which, again, is an allegation made by members of his own unit. Here is CNN's Tim Foreman saying there's no evidence he avoided combat. Well, I mean, there is evidence that he found out in early 2005 that he would likely be deployed, and that's when he decided to step out of the National Guard.
As you would expect often with Team Trump out there, there's some truth, there's some falsehood in it. Let's start with the initial claim there. The notion that somehow what Tim Walz did was dodge going to service. He was in the Guard for 24 years. JD Vance was in the Marines for 4 years. Yes, while he was in there, he filed papers to run for Congress in February of 2005. He retired from his Guard unit that May. The orders to deploy did not come until 2 months after that. So the claim that he was somehow dodging going over here after 24 years of service to say, well, I just don't want to go to combat, there's just no evidence to back that up right now.
Okay, well, I mean, the evidence is from his fellow members of his unit, who are the ones who are making the accusation. I mean, there's that. So Walz could be asked about this, but he too is dodging interviews at this point. Here is Tim Walz, who's on the tarmac yesterday, and people are asking him about it, and he runs away. Brave Tim Walz running away.
Governor, Vance accused you of stolen valor. Your response?
And he's just ignoring. Apparently, he's going to pretend he's deaf, just like that time he got a DUI. He's out. Well, Tim Walz ran away from questions like the Roadrunner. He's just gone. Well, here's the problem. You cannot run away from time issues. Okay? If you've got a work-life balance issue, the thing you cannot run away from is that time is a finite thing. And if you're spending all that time doing like your shipping and mailing, that's stupid. Free up the time consumed by tedious mailing and shipping tasks with Stamps.com. Stamps.com streamlines your postage needs, making your business more efficient, putting more life into your work-life balance. Take care of mailing and shipping wherever you are, even on the go, with the Stamps.com mobile app. All you need is a computer and printer. They even send you a free scale. Easily schedule package pickups through your Stamps.com dashboard. Automatically see your cheapest and fastest shipping options from different carriers. Put more life into your work-life balance with Stamps.com. Sign up at Stamps.com/Shapiro for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and free digital scale. No long-term commitments, no contracts. Just go to Stamps.com/Shapiro. We've been using Stamps.com for years here at Daily Wire. We can't afford to waste our time or waste our money. Stamps.com solves that problem for us when it comes to shipping and mailing. Go to Stamps.com/Shapiro to get started. Again, that's Stamps.com/Shapiro. Save yourself time and money. Stamps.com/Shapiro. Meanwhile, the Democrats have come up with a counter angle, which is asking whether JD Vance has ever been in combat. Now, the difference is that JD Vance was in fact deployed to a war zone. He was deployed in Iraq, and it turns out that Iraq was a large-scale war zone in which people who were well inside the green zone were routinely attacked by terrorists. But here's Nancy Pelosi now making a very large strategic error by claiming that JD Vance somehow skipped out on duty or there was something wrong with JD Vance's service. JD Vance isn't the one who is falsely claiming things about his service. That's not JD Vance is not the person who dropped out to avoid being deployed. That accusation is not even made about JD Vance. But here's Nancy Pelosi asking whether Vance has ever been in combat.
JD Vance has criticized him as never having been in combat. And,
has he? Has he?
Well,
has JD Vance been in combat?
Well, I think he was over in Iraq, I think, as a public relations officer, as a communications officer. I think that's the case.
Well, that's fascinating. That's and by the way, she should at this point, if she were a journalist, Andrea Mitchell, she might say, well, he was deployed to a combat zone, which is the entire question here. Meanwhile, top Kamala Harris surrogate Senator Tina Smith said, I'm not aware that JD Vance ever served in the military, which Jim Acosta might want to correct her on this one because he clearly did.
Here is Tim Walz, who enlisted when he was 17 years old. He served in the National Guard for 24 years. And I'm not aware of any military service that JD Vance has ever served. So let's just make the comparison there. And what happened in the tragedy of the killing of George
Marines,
Floyd and then the unrest.
He was.
Yeah, okay, pardon me for that.
Yeah, Jim, that little nod until
to go after somebody's record of service.
Pardon me for that. To go after somebody's record of service. You just did it 1 second ago, Tina. So is this going to haunt Tim Walz? It ain't going to look good for Tim Walz. That is for sure. And that, of course, combines with the fact that Tim Walz is a crazy radical. So here is JD Vance. So again, JD Vance has been the leading aggressive tip of the spear for the Trump campaign, which is great. He's, as we'll see, he's being incredibly aggressive. He's doing things that you would want a vice presidential candidate to do. Donald Trump needs to get out of Mar-a-Lago and he needs to go campaign right now. And he needs to make a meticulous assault on the Harris-Walz campaign. I want him to win. And in order for him to win, he needs to do that because the media, as we can see, are providing a solid front in favor of Harris-Walz. Here is JD Vance pointing out that Tim Walz not only has a stolen valor issue, he's also a crazy radical.
Now, Tim Walz is a crazy radical, of course. He allowed rioters to burn down Minneapolis, but most people are going to be voting for Kamala Harris or for Donald Trump. I think it was a common sense observation. He said it before I was the pick. He said it after I was the pick, and I think he's absolutely right. Now, I will say that on the vice presidential issue, it's interesting what Tim Walz says about Kamala Harris. Tim Walz is a person, again, who promoted rioters burning down the biggest city in his state. This is a guy who wants to give driver's licenses to illegal aliens. This is a guy who wants to take children away from their parents if those parents don't consent to sex changes for minors. This is a radical human being who comes from the far left wing of the Democrat Party.
That, of course, is true. Here is audio of Tim Walz yesterday. And this came out yesterday, talking about the First Amendment just a few months ago and suggesting that the First Amendment does not protect speech he doesn't like.
There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
Really? No protections for that sort of stuff. And again, everyone knows how radical Tim Walz is, but Tim Walz has always been radical. And by the way, he's sort of awkward about the whole Middle Eastern thing as well. It turns out that he wrote a master's thesis on Holocaust education. That master's thesis on Holocaust education suggested that the Holocaust should not be taught in a unique way. He said instead it should be taught in the context of genocides in all parts of the world. as though there's nothing unique about the Nazi Holocaust against the Jews, as though it's equivalent to any other attack on any other population, which historically it actually is not. So Tim Walz. But it's amazing. In real time, they're trying to portray him as a moderate and Kamala Harris as moderate. This is the least moderate ticket in the history of the United States. They're all pro the kids. They are all pro-abortion up to and past point of birth. They are all in favor of weakness in the Middle East. They're all in favor of cutting the military. They're all in favor of blowing out the spending. They're all in favor of increasing taxes, and yet they're moderate. Bakari Sellers, super nice guy. Met him when we did Bill Maher the other day. And but he's wrong about this. He says, don't worry, Tim Walz is a moderate. Even Tim Walz doesn't say Tim Walz is a moderate. Here's Bakari Sellers.
One of the things that Governor Walz is going to be able to do is go to all of those cities outside of those major cities. He's going to talk to every working man and have some type of relatability to them. It's almost refreshing to see someone who just simply cares about people in an authentic way. Regardless of the caricatures of the right, you're not going to be able to pull Governor Walz to the left or to the right. Governor Walz is right down the middle of America, where most Americans are.
Tim Walz was directly asked at one point whether he was a moderate. Here was his actual answer.
Governor Walz, are you a progressive or are you a centrist?
I'm a progressive.
He's a progressive, according to him. He's not a centrist. But again, the media gonna media. Well, the biggest thing the media will not do is ask any questions, which brings us to a stunt that JD Vance pulled yesterday on the tarmac in Wisconsin. It's kind of great. We'll get to that momentarily. First, remember the incredible film, What is a Woman? Of course you do. The best documentary of the last 10 years. Well, Matt Walsh got the same group of white guys back together to ask America's next burning question. Am I racist? It will be in theaters this September. Matt went deep undercover into the cesspool of DEI insanity, rubbing elbows with professional race hustlers and diversity con artists. Some would say he did the work. Well, now it's your turn. The date I need you to remember is August 15th, Thursday, August 15th, next week. That is when pre-sale tickets go on sale. We need your help, because we're going to stick it to the woke mob one ticket at a time. The more tickets you pre-buy, the more theaters the movie will appear in. So we need your help. Again, that's August 15th. Keep an eye out. www.miracist.com to watch the official trailer and get all the details. www.miracist.com. Okay, meanwhile, the biggest issue that the Trump campaign faces is actually not Harris-Walz. The biggest issue is the media, which have been studiously silent in asking where the hell Kamala Harris is. She's gone. Poof. Like Ellen Page. She's just gone. She doesn't exist anymore. She disappeared. Where is she? She appears every so often like a hologram on TV to read off a teleprompter and cackle weirdly, and then they call it joy. But why hasn't she answered a single question for nearly 3 weeks? This is insane. She is the presidential candidate of a major party. Right now, according to the polls, the front runner to be the next president of the United States, and she has answered 0 questions. 0. Not one. 0. She has responded to more pro-Hamas protesters than she has to journalists for 3 weeks. Where are you guys? Why aren't you doing your job? Where is the clamor? Where is the hue and cry to ask Kamala Harris a question? Why, it's almost as though you're completely complacent to sit there and just eat whatever crumbs she decides to feed you from her plate. It's almost as though you are small lap dogs. Not watchdogs, lap dogs. The hell is wrong with you people? Where are all the journalismers? Why aren't you on TV tonight? Protesting. Why doesn't Kamala sit down for a serious interview? Why doesn't Kamala do a press conference? Why doesn't she answer any questions about her policies? She's out there yesterday saying she's going to bring down inflation. I noticed she's been the vice president, presiding over the worst inflation in 40 years. Where are you guys? What would you say you do here? You have one job. What would you say that you do here for a living? It's unbelievable. And so Kamala yesterday, she arrives in Wisconsin. She's on the tarmac. She was campaigning in the same swing state as JD Vance. So she shows up and she meets a bunch of Girl Scouts because you understand she's a girl. She's girl bossing this thing. Doesn't answer questions. Inherited her nomination without ever winning a single vote. Was picked to be vice president, not because she's good at anything, but because she is a black woman. But she's going to girl boss this thing. And girls, you too can be a vice president and a presidential nominee one day without ever winning a single vote. Well, not you girls. You're white. That's not going to happen. But in any case, here is Kamala Harris meeting with some Girl Scouts. And she's there with Tim Walz. Oh, weird coach dad and Mamala. Oh, and fake enthusiasms. Oh, wow. So meaningful. Oh, the heroism. Still no questions from the media. Nothing. Nothing, just photo ops. God, I swear to God, Tim Walz's fake enthusiasm is so grating. Even in like short videos, he's clapping his hands and dancing on his feet and he can't sit still. Like, my goodness. Dude, just like calm down. Just calm it. Just a little. Take it down like from an 11 to like a 7. Anyway, JD Vance shows up on the same tarmac. And he starts walking off from his plane to her plane. Because he says, to the media, you guys might want to ask her a question. Like, it's not like, maybe I'll go over there and ask her a question since you guys aren't. Like, maybe some of you should. By the way, she agreed to debate JD Vance 3 times. And you keep hearing that Trump won't debate Kamala Harris, and he should. Also, she agreed to debate Vance 3 times. That ain't going to happen. Here is JD Vance doing the work.
I figured I'd come by and, one, just get a good look at the plane. Hopefully it's going to be my plane in a few months, but I also thought you guys might get lonely because the vice president doesn't answer questions from reporters and hasn't for 17 days. Have they given you guys an explanation for why she won't take questions from reporters? No? Nobody? Okay, great. Well, I hope that she changes her mind because it'd be good for the American people, and I think it'd be good for you all if she actually ran a real campaign instead of one from a basement with a teleprompter. So have a good one, guys. See ya.
Correct. From JD Vance. Correct. And I love that the media are angrier at JD Vance for pointing out that they're crappy at their jobs than they are at Kamala Harris for, not allowing them to do their jobs. It's pretty amazing. The opinion hosts on the media are, of course, doing their best to act as an absolute wall in favor of the Democrats. They've brought out Chris Matthews from retirement, which I'm excited about because that means I can do my Chris Matthews impersonation. They brought Chris Matthews, looking all rumpled. He's a little older, Still haven't done my hair. It's been like 10 years since I was on the Iron Hardball. I'm so say. Haven't done my hair still. Didn't get a haircut. Growing a mullet. Business in front, party in back. Come on in here. All rumpled. Looking like I took my suit. Just threw it in the washer. Didn't put it in the dryer. Like to dry drip that thing. Then I came out here. Rolled on in. All rumpled. Looking weird. I talked about how Kamala Harris, she's giving me a tingle down my leg. She's like John Wayne. Except John Wayne had a... But other than that, the same.
We saw leadership last night. Bob Casey, the former governor of Pennsylvania, who won his reelection by 1 million votes, said Pennsylvania is a John Wayne state, not a Jane Fonda state. She was John Wayne last night. She was a leader, and she was clear that she was the boss. And she did it in a way that wasn't instructive or difficult. She just came across as naturally the leader of that room.
She's such a leader. It was just like John Wayne. So she rode it on a horse. She got off. She said, "Hey, partner." And she drank down a sarsaparilla. And it was amazing. Oh, my God. Thrills up my leg, down my leg, up my other leg, into my head, in my ear, out my ear, around my hair. Chris Matthews, MSNBC. Doing an amazing job over there, MSNBC. But it's not just Chris Matthews who is doing the worshipful routine over at MSNBC. Over at MSNBC, they are now Meg Ryan and When Harry Met Sally. They're faking orgasms all day long over there. Here is Morning Joe guest. What's this idiot's name? Oh, yeah, it's Anand Giridharadas. Yes, I remember him from that time that he played a Marvel supervillain with that hair. In any case, here he was saying yesterday that the reason that Tim Walz is such a great pick is because he's a PSA for white folks. There is a deeper truth here that is kind of fascinating. Here we go.
The biggest significance of this man is that he is an older white man in a moment in which the far right is trying to convince white people that the future is treacherous for them, trying to convince men that the future is treacherous for them. And here is an older white man, a coach, a soldier, who is very hard to dismiss as some kind of effete coastal elite, who is telling older folks and white people, you do not need to be afraid of the future. There is joy in the future. There is joy in having your boss be a black woman. There is joy in what is coming.
It's that last part. Okay, it's that last part. That's an amazing statement. You need Tim Walz to come along and tell you, you racist white people, it's okay to have a black female boss. He's going to show you how to bend the knee to the black lady. That's why we need... This is how left-wingers think of the world. It's insane. They accuse people on the right of being racist for saying correctly that Kamala Harris would not be where she is without the affirmative action picking done by Joe Biden in 2020, which is clearly and evidently true. There are 1,000 candidates better for the VP than Kamala Harris, just like there are 1,000 candidates who are better for the presidency than Kamala Harris. The last part of that, which is that older white folks have to learn that it's not scary to, be subservient to the like, that's a wild thing. No one should think like that. Honestly, like that's a crazy way to think. Maybe it's okay for your boss to be of any color. Maybe it's okay for your boss to be white or green or brown or yellow. Maybe they could be any color, as it turns out. It doesn't matter if they're qualified. But that's not what he's saying. He's saying that white people need to be taught that it is okay to be subservient to people of other races, because that's what he thinks of white people. That's racist. That's gross and racist. And that is the way the Democratic Party thinks about the world, which is truly an astonishing thing. On the other half of them defending the Harris-Walz campaign is, of course, them attacking JD Vance. So JD has made himself subject to the media. And as we all know, making yourself subject to the media wins points if you're a Republican. Hiding from the media doesn't lose you any points if you're a Democrat. So listen to some of the questions that JD Vance was asked yesterday in Wisconsin. Here is one media member to Vance asking why he doesn't smile more. Now, remember, if Kamala Harris were asked why she doesn't smile more, that's sexist and horrifying. You're not allowed to ask a lady why she doesn't smile enough. JD Vance, you can ask it. It's totally fine.
A little bit different here. You've been criticized as being a little too serious, maybe angry sometimes. What makes you smile? What makes you happy?
Well, I smile at a lot of things, including bogus questions from the media, man. I mean, look, I think if you watch a full speech that I give, I actually am having a good time out here and I'm enjoying this. But look, sometimes you got to take the good with the bad. And right now, I am angry about what Kamala Harris has done to this country and done to the American southern border.
I mean, again, that's a good answer, but the question is absurd. Why aren't you smiling more? Why don't you smile enough? How about this reporter? Were you a bad VP pick? Honest to God, Tim Walz is a full-scale radical involved in a stolen valor controversy, and they can't ask him a question. But JD Vance, they're like, the questions so far are, why don't you smile more, and were you a bad pick? Substantive stuff here, guys.
When Trump was at the NABJ conference, he was asked whether you'd be ready to assume the presidency on day one, and he responded by talking about how the vice president pick doesn't really impact the election outcome.
Sure.
Was that the response that you were hoping for from the former president?
Well, what the president has said, and I agree with him, is that most people are voting at the top of the ticket.
So again, great questions. They also asked JD Vance once again about Harris's race. At some point, the media should actually do their job and go to the leading ticket and ask them a question or two. But no.
How can you fake your race? If
I'm sorry?
She's both Indian and black, how can she fake her race?
She fakes who she is depending on the audience that she's in front of, and that's who she is, and that's who she's always been.
Again, JD Vance not wrong about any of this. It is just demonstrative of the fact that the Trump campaign, the Trump-Vance campaign, is running not just against Harris-Walz, they're running against Harris-Walz and the entire legacy media, top to bottom. It's truly an amazing spectacle. They are making asses of themselves. I only hope the American people remember that when it comes time to vote. Alrighty, in just 1 second, we'll get into the situation over in Britain, where things are ramping up to fever pitch. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro. Check out for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click the link in the description and join us.
Republicans are Nazis. You cannot separate yourselves from the bad white people.
Growing up, I never thought much about race. It never really seemed to matter that much, at least not to me. Am I racist?
I would really appreciate it if you left.
I'm trying to learn. I'm on this journey. If I'm going to sort this out, I need to go deeper undercover.
They gon' say I'm racist.
Joining us now is Matt, certified DEI expert.
Here's my certification. And what you're doing is you're stretching out of your whiteness. This is more for you and less for you. Is America inherently racist?
The word inherent is challenging there.
I want to rename the George Washington Monument to the George Floyd Monument.
America is racist to its bones.
So inherently.
Yes, this country is a piece of shit.
White.
Folks.
White.
Trash. White supremacy. White woman. White boy.
Is there a black person around? There's a black person right here. Does he not exist? Hi, Robin.
Hi. What's your name?
I'm Matt.
I just had to ask who you are because you have to be careful.
Never be too careful.
They gon' say you racist.
In theaters September 13th, rated PG-13.